And we're rolling. We're to go.
Alright, hello guys. I'm Mr. Stotts. I'm here with Dr. Vanderpool. She's agreed to join us as part of our LEGO STEM event. She's going to be representing the field of science. She's going to talk to you guys a little bit about what she does as a professor at LMU, and I've been fortunate enough to have Dr. Vanderpool as my professor in the past, so it's going to be a treat, and I'm just going to turn it over to her. Thank you, Dr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mr. Stotts. Hi, J. Frank White. My name is Dr. Vanderpool, as Mr. Stotts said, and I teach biology and environmental science at LMU for undergraduate students. And so to tell you a little bit about what I do, we thought that today we would just come out here to what I call my office. So welcome to the office, everybody. This is Indian Creek. It is a small tributary of the Powell River, which is a place that I do a lot of work outside of the classroom and have a lot of students involved in the activities that we have going on here. The Powell River is very close to our campus. It is just right down Route 25E. It runs right through the backyard here in Claiborne County, and it is one of the most important resources that we have in this county. It's a wonderful source of fresh water, and there's an awful lot of summertime activity with canoeing and kayaking and float trips down the river, so it's just a lot of fun to enjoy. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that live in the river, because that's one of the areas where I do a lot of my work. Now, my background is that I'm an aquatic ecologist. That means that I went to school for a long time, right? I started off in high school, and I loved my biology classes in high school. But right after high school, I got involved with some projects on Norris Lake, another water resource that's very close to us, and started doing some work with fish on Norris Lake. And that kind of blossomed into an undergraduate degree in biology from Florida State, where I was still working with fish. And even after that, I went on to the University of Maine to do a master's degree where we were tracking migrating Atlantic salmon. And after that project was over, finally came back to the University of Tennessee to do my PhD, again working with fish, with rainbow trout. So a lot of time with fish. The fish are not the only thing that I work with. Today I want to talk to you about a special project on this river that we've been involved in with for over a year now. And it is a project to restore endangered freshwater mussels to the Powell River. A couple of questions you probably have. Number one, what are freshwater mussels? Well, freshwater mussels are little bivalve organisms that are considered to be invertebrates, which means they don't have a backbone. They look a lot like a clam, but they're not a clam, they're freshwater. So this is a shell from a freshwater mussel, and one of the things that freshwater mussels do is they will burrow down into the substrate of the river. Down here in the rocks and the sand and the mud, there's a shell right here, the one that has passed on. So at one time, historically, the Powell River was full of freshwater mussels. And then some kind of tough things happened. There was a lot of problems with water quality due to coal mining activities up in the Virginia portion of the river. And then we've had some issues with pesticide spraying and some other things that have caused these little mussels to, over time, many years, start to disappear. Well, it turns out that freshwater mussels are an important part of the ecosystem. So we are hard at work with some friends from Fish and Wildlife Service and Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries and TWRA and Tennessee Valley Authority, a lot of agencies coming together to try to bring these little mussels back into the river. So how do we do that? Well, we start with hatchery. The mussels are born in a hatchery, and then they are transported here to the river, and they're placed down in the substrate so we can try to see how they're going to grow and if they're going to survive. And one of the projects that we have is tracking these little mussels in terms of their growth and their survival. Now, the one that I have in my hand is Epioblasma capsiformes. That's a great big scientific name for the oyster mussel. And this little guy is no longer living, so I brought it out here to kind of show you an example of how our equipment works. This is little slow mussel is about 2 years old, so I'm going to move in here.
So let me zoom forward.
Because I want you to be able to see that on the outside of this mussel we have some interesting things. We have some tags. There's a little green tag that helps us identify it and find it when it's out here in the river. And then there's this strange looking little bar tag on the back of this mussel shell. This is called a pit tag, passive integrator transponder. And what it does is it emits a radio signal. Now, why is that important? Because we use that radio signal to find it when it's in the wild. I have a machine called a reader. I'm going to come over and pick this up. And it has an antenna. So this is a pit tag reader. I'm turn it around so you can see what it looks like. And it's attached to this big long antenna. And the antenna portion goes down in the water. And you wave that around kind of like a wand, as if you were maybe using a metal detector, or I don't know, maybe even a weed eater. And when the antenna comes across a mussel with a pit tag on it, the reader will make a ping. And the little pinging noise will give us a code that tells us exactly which mussel it is. So we can pick them out down to the individual mussel. Why do we care about that? Well, we care about that because they're endangered. This little mussel that I have in my hand is one of 90 mussels that we put back in the river. 90 mussels from a total population in the world of 3,000. So every one is precious in terms of trying to get them restored. Let's talk for a minute about why we'd want to do that. Who cares about freshwater mussels, right? What do? Why are they interesting? Freshwater mussels are nature's little engineers, especially in a stream or a riverbed. When the mussel burrows down into the substrate, it secretes a kind of sticky substance. And down in that substrate, that little mussel shell will wedge itself. And every time that there's a big rainstorm or a big pulse of water that comes through, all of the substrate materials, the rocks and pebbles and sand that are located around this little mussel, they all get held in place because the mussel is kind of holding them in place. So if you have a lot of these out there in the river, the creek, or the stream, that helps hold everything in place when a flood comes through. And that's important because those materials are also homes for other critters besides just the freshwater mussels. The other thing that's important about freshwater mussels is they are filter feeders. You may have heard that term before in science. What that means is that they strain tiny organisms out of the water as their food. Some of those organisms just happen to be bacteria. So the other nice thing that freshwater mussels do for us is they clean and filter the water. So one of the projects that we're involved in is trying to return and restore various species of these mussels to the river that are either very small in number or maybe aren't found here anymore, but we know that historically they were originally here. So that's our freshwater mussel project, and we have several students involved with that project. I'm going to put this one away in my pocket for just a second. One of the other things that we do when we're working on the river and trying to make sure that the river's going to be healthy is we take a look at what's living here. So we do a lot of surveys for aquatic organisms, primarily insects. And believe it or not, yeah, they're insects that live in water. As a matter of fact, most of the insects that you might know as airborne insects, a lot of them have a juvenile stage called a nymph that starts off in the water. And they can live in the water for several years before they ever develop wings and take to the air. One of the most common of those is dragonflies. I'm sure you've probably all seen dragonflies in the air. Well, they start off down here in the bottom. And along with dragonflies, lots of other organisms like stoneflies, mayflies, and caddisflies, and dobson flies. I'm going to share with you a couple of my little friends right here. And it may take me just a minute to find one or two to catch to show you. But I'm looking for water pennies. Water pennies are beetles. And they're called water pennies for a reason, because if you look at the shape of a water penny, they look kind of like a coin. They're flat and they're round, and they are designed to live on the underside of a rock, so they're able to cling, and because of their shape, the water can just flow right over top of them. Talk about being, hydrodynamic. But if you flip them over, they have tiny little legs that show you that in fact they are a beetle. And there's our water penny. One of the nice things about finding water pennies are that they give you some clues that the water quality is in pretty good shape. Some of the organisms that live here need very clean water. And if the water is not clean, you won't find them. But if you come and you search and you survey, do some of the techniques that we do to try to find them, and they're there, well, that tells you that the water is probably in pretty good shape because they're able to survive in that ecosystem. So a lot of work ongoing here, right in your backyard here on the Powell River, an important resource for the people of Claiborne County, and a very important resource for the plant and animal species that depend on the quality of this water to survive. Hopefully, someday I'll get a chance to meet all of you in person, and maybe we'll get out to the river and hunt for some water pennies and some mussels together. Thank you so much for having me be part of your STEM program. Science is one of the most exciting things that you can do with your life. It has been a great day at the office. So if you want to come to the office in a place like this, think about science and a STEM career. Thanks so much.